Everyone. Hope you're all doing well. And I want to say thank you for attending this session regarding my research towards my doctoral journey. I also want to say thanks to the committee to allow me to present my findings. So first off, I want to make sure that it's known that there are no disclosures I have regarding my research. I also want to acknowledge my dissertation team for who, without their constant guidance and support, this would not be possible. So thank you, Pam, Patricia, and Jerry. So what are the objectives of this talk today? I want everybody to be aware of the different terms, bullying, mobbing, and harassment. I want people to be aware of the characteristics, what to look for, the signs when this is occurring. I am also going to describe the results and the negative X questionnaire survey that I did in the fall, and talk a little bit about the survey as a tool that is used in this topic. At the end, I'm going to talk about the cost to the person. What does bullying, mobbing, what does this negative behavior do to a person? And what is the financial fallout to a company? That's probably a big important aspect that I think companies really need to be aware of. And last but not least, the objective is understand you are not alone. You did not cause this. Those of you who've been targets of negative behavior, don't put the burden on you. It's you. It wasn't about you. So what is the problem? Well, different authors from the research that I've uncovered have estimates from 27% to 96% of the US workforce reporting bullying in the workplace. Why the big variance? Why is there such this big gap in percentages? Well, it comes down to the next aspect of the comment. It says the variance is due to the length of time researched. If you look at the Shavin citation that I looked at, what Shavin did in the Forbes magazine, they looked at a study that was done by Vital Smarts, in which they asked participants, they had, I think it was several thousand, they asked, have you ever been bullied in your career? And 96% of the people said, yeah, and some point in time in my career I was bullied. Whereas if you look at NAMI's research and citation of their survey, Gary and Ruth NAMI run the Workplace Bullying Institute. It's a wonderful website, and they're probably the most up-to-date website on this topic in the United States. Anyways, every 2 years they do a survey. And in 2013, they found that 27% of the workforce had stated that they had been bullied in the past year. Now, the most recent survey that just came out in 2021, I believe it showed 36%. So you can see that the estimates vary based on the duration and what the research is looking at. Workplace bullying is being addressed more frequently in recent times, not just because of the emotional cost to the target or the emotional strain on the people that have to witness it, but a lot of the corporations are realizing the financial damage that one bully can cost to a company. Depending on the research, depending on what the results are, you can see that some of the research, the estimates are anywhere from 100 to 150,000 all the way up to a couple $1 million if there's any legalities or a lawsuit involved. So let's look at the definitions. This is what I want to be clear on so that you have a clear understanding of the differences. Bullying. Worldwide, there's a variance of definitions. But one thing is in common is the repeated action. So in this case, I'm using a quote from Manners and Cates. It's the repeated and health-harming mistreatment of one or more perpetrators. Key phrase, repeated. Everybody has a bad day, we know it. It doesn't mean you're being bullied, it just means that someone had a bad day, they came in, they may have been stopped by the police, got a ticket on the way in, so they're in a bad mood. That happens. I'm talking about repeated behavior. Now, if you look at some of the more recent research, we look at negative behavior from 6 months to a year, and that's what more recent research is looking at, a more current aspect of things. But bullying is usually considered one-on-one. So it could be male to male, male to female, female to male, female to female, I'm sorry. And so that's what they look at for in my research and what I've uncovered. That's my interpretation, is usually a one-on-one. Now, mobbing is a little different. Mobbing is a ganging up on a target by one or more people and company involvement. And I'll explain that in a second. So the term mobbing, Heinz Lehmann took from author by the name of Conrad Lorenz, who studied the animal kingdom. And he talked about mobbing in the animal kingdom, where, for instance, like in the birds, if you have like an intruder, like a hawk that's coming into an area to raid nests and stuff, the rest of the birds will gang up on the hawk to try to rid him out of the area. Well, Heinz Lehmann took that design and put it to workplace in the workplace. In Europe, mobbing is far more common of a term, and bullying is used in the United States. So that's something that is the big difference between the two terms too. Heinz Lehmann felt that this behavior is so detrimental to oneself. In his early writings, he literally considered it psychological terrorism. And for those of you who've ever gone through this and have been affected by it, you understand when I say psychological terrorism. Lehman outlined 4 phases. He talked about a triggering incident, and that's no different than in bullying. You have an individual that, for whatever reason, they target somebody and they start with repeated negative behavior. It's a triggering incident, so to speak. Well, as time goes on, the target starts to defend their reputation because they honestly don't know what they did wrong, but they're blaming themselves. But hey, wait, I did this and I did that, and I have a lot of value here. And what ends up happening is they're defending their reputation. Well, then that perpetrator will be, in some cases, like in a big corporation, it may be middle management. They go to the administration and they start labeling the target. Oh, this person's a cancer. This person's a problem. So now the company's involved. And instead of helping the target, sometimes companies don't want that information to get out on social media or news or whatever. So they try to bury it. And what they'll do is now they get involved in trying to get rid of this individual, which leads to expulsion. And expulsion is simply this: either the target leaves on their own or they end up getting fired. So that's the difference between mobbing and bullying. Now, harassment is based around the Civil Rights Act of 1964, in which negative actions against a protected class, such as race, religion, gender, age, culture, okay, and it's also outlined by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. In our field, or what most people, it's more common, is people talk about sexual harassment, which is just one form. And if you've been to national meetings, or if you've attended the previous national meetings, you'll know that there's a group of the executive directors or female leadership in the various organizations that literally do a very nice job talking about harassment, in which they describe it, they talk about resources for those that have it, and they'll even have a discussion or a panel in which they discuss and allow people to discuss within. And I encourage any of you, if that presentation is in the future meetings, please take advantage of it. So yeah, and they also talk about going to resources like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. But make no mistake, the harassment aspect is based on infringement of the protected classes. So how did I get started in this research? What is it, why am I doing this? Well, it's no different than anybody else. I have my own personal experiences. I came out of school and I started a job, and what do I get? Instead of helping, learn how to work with patients, one of my first duties out of school was I had to clean the plaster trap, or I had to clean the toilets, or I had to clean the lab up. I had to sweep everything up. So you start to find that you're not getting the experiences that you were trained to, or else you start having your boss start to introduce negative behavior to you. Well, as I progressed and I became a faculty at Northwestern, remember, for 20 years, I graduated 46 classes at Northwestern, which yields a lot of graduates. And from that, you get a lot of phone calls from students that are undergoing a lot of strain and stress in their residency. I'm not the only one. I'm sure every faculty member in schools has their own stories. However, I can tell you that a lot of residents, it wasn't uncommon for me to hear, well, they're threatening not to sign my papers unless I do this, or this person's making me do this, or I'm being tormented. This is a horrendous situation. How do I get out of it? And so over the years, you have all these anecdotal studies. However, there's no peer-reviewed literature, and there's no literature per se at all. So that's why I wanted to start generating something to help our field out. So I started out originally, a couple of years ago. My original direction for my dissertation was I just wanted to find out, does it exist in our field? Does bullying exist in orthotics and and the prosthetics profession? And my chair was blunt. She says, why even bother? She goes, you said that the alliance in your profession has developed policy against bullying. You said that the executive directors of the females have come out and they do a presentation. You told me that one of the manufacturers in your profession has a women's organization in which they address that. So your profession has already on their own recognized that it exists. So let's move beyond that. Let's look at something a little bit more finite, which I'll get into later. However, that wasn't good enough for me, being the doubting Thomas that I am. After I handed in my first 3 chapters for review, I couldn't help myself. I decided to put together a survey, and I wanted to I wanted to see. So I basically asked, the gender questions, generation questions. I administered the NAQ, and then I left an open area for the measurement. I used and the NAQ is essentially, the tool. As an analogy in our field, it's comparable to the amputee mobility predictor or the timed up and go. It's a tool. And in the bullying and harassment and the mobbing circles, it's been rated as a very reliable tool. And so it's used on a regular basis. It was developed by Stahl Einerson back in 1991 in Norway. However, when other countries got wind of it and they tried to use it, the translation of the questions to other countries didn't work well. So what ended up happening is that the authors decided to redesign it and redesign the questioning so that it could be used more international. And now it is used on all the different continents in the world as a tool. It started out it's a 22 item survey with 3 themes. It looks at work-related bullying, person-related bullying, physical intimidation. I, however, took a couple extra questions from an addendum survey that Stahl Einerson put together, and I added it to the 22. So I actually administered 24 questions. And those 2 questions pertain to household effects. So the methodology was real simple. This mixed method is 5 questions. What's the gender? What's your generation? What's your education? What is your P&O education? I administered the NAQR, and essentially it was just 24 items, and you had to answer never, occasionally, monthly, weekly, or daily. And then because of the fact that it's administered for the past 6 months, I wanted people, if they wanted to provide comments. So they would tell me if they've had some experiences they wanted me to know about, and it was all anonymous. So the results were, the survey was open for a little over a month. I had 341 respondents with 100% completion rate, according to SurveyMonkey. However, digging deeper, I found that 14 participants chose not to answer every single question. They ignored a couple. And some of them called me up and they said, "Well, I'm not working. I just want to answer. I want to provide comments." And wow, did they provide comments for me? The interesting part of this is that the one question that was omitted the most was, have you experienced physical violence at work? And so I'll talk about that in the results section. So all told, when it came to NAQR, I only had 320, I had 327 fully completed the survey. The others, filled out gender, education, yada, yada, and gave comments. However, they didn't do the NAQ. So the results are simple. I had 147 responses of female, 194 responses of male. Generation, this is interesting because it really, this slide is very telling in a multifaceted way. When we look at the generation, we look at the baby boomers. I had 68 responses, but look I only had 9 female, 59 male. Gen Xers, I had 151 responses. Now look at the breakdown, a little bit closer. A little bit closer, more female to male. And millennials, 122 responses. Now look at the difference. We have more female than male. And let's take a look at our profession for a second. When I went to school, my class had 0 females in the prosthetics class. Even when I first started teaching, you'd be lucky to have 1 or 2 females in prosthetics. Now, if you look at some of the data that's coming out of NCOPE and the applications, you're finding that in the last 4 years, there have been more than 50% females applying to school versus the male. Now, this is telling, because let's think about it. They're baby boomers had a different education. There are more of them in the industry as opposed to now. The education is vastly different than 30 years ago, and there's more female in it. So there's a lot of question marks here as to these provide variables for bullying. So the education level, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I didn't like how I worded it. I wasn't explanatory enough, and how I found out was the fact that one person didn't even answer the question, and I couldn't figure out why, and that makes sense. You had 12 responses that didn't have any formal training. So in other words, they were hired off the street and they were brought into the field. You had 23 responses that have a high school diploma. They had 6 responses that completed a technician or assistant program. And then you had 170 responses that had a BS and or certificate, and therein lies the rub. There are some individuals that are certificate individuals in our field that only have a high school diploma, and that's where I kind of made a mistake on the questioning. So I'm not real happy with that, although this still yields a little bit more of what I'm looking for, the information. MPO, we had a good percentage of individuals MPO. So the responses were such that based on the feedback, there's the survey requested behavior from the past 6 months. Point of discussion, which really have to look at, is I was asking for behavior between April and September of 2020. Many companies had furloughs. Many companies kind of shut their services down a bit. Did that affect it? Most likely. So it's something that I have to look at. But interesting that the top 5 questions of behavior yielded 50% or better in the past 6 months. The top 10 questions yielded at least 35%. So let's look a little closer. The reason I want you to look at this is because the question is a correlation to characteristics of bullying, mobbing, and harassment. The first 2 that caused the most highest percentage of response was work is causing you lack of sleep, and work is affecting the home life. These are characteristics of bullying, or something to look at anyways. Then you look at having your opinion ignored. Almost 57% feel that their opinion is ignored at work. Once again, characteristic sign of bullying, mobbing, and harassment. Being excluded from conversations or from decisions in the company, or the boss withholding information. Okay, these are all characteristics. Next 5, ordered to work below the level of confidence. I can attest to this. I would answer on a daily basis. What did I say earlier? I was cleaning plaster traps. I was cleaning toilets. I mean, it was ridiculous. And what's even interesting, it's not listed here, but in my results, I found that female responses were much higher on this question than male responses. Exposed to unmanageable workload. Okay, here's a big gray area. And this probably kind of taints the results a little bit. However, what I'm referring to is, yes, everybody has a job description and you have to be held accountable. From a company point of view, you have a job description and you have to follow that. Now, I also understand in this day and age, when it comes to reimbursement and trying to be soluble and profitable as a company, you have to make sure that you're finishing your job in a timely manner and you're billing it and you're receiving your reimbursement. So you may feel that the workload may be a bit much. What I'm referring to is that there are times I've used to hear students talk about to me is that the boss puts so much stress on them because the boss literally wants them out. They literally put so much load on their shoulders, they can't accomplish it. in an effort to try to document to fire them. That's kind of where this question is, but I'm not sure that's explained well. Then you look at gossiping, 30, almost 37%. And if any of you, wherever you work, our field is very small. The grapevine exists, whether you want to acknowledge it. It's anecdotal, yes, but there's a lot of gossip that goes on at the city level, regional level, national level. You find bosses that like to micromanage your work. The other one is a repeated reminders of errors where you're constantly being, your mistakes are being pointed out. There's another characteristic of bullying. But these are all signs. And so the percentages are such that even the top in number 10 shows that at least over a third of the individuals are reporting activities of bullying, mobbing, and harassment. So the most, now, is this a disturbing response or no? I told you about the one question that people avoided. I'm curious, there's a hidden meaning here. And I really have to say that. The question on physical violence, 96 reported never, 4% reported occasionally, monthly, and weekly. 8 female, 3 male individuals reported that they're exposed to physical violence on a occasionally, monthly, or weekly. And 11 respondents chose not to answer this question. That in and of itself makes me curious. I'm curious to dig deeper into those weeds and find out why. But the qualitative comments I want to talk about, by far the most damning section of all of them. 146 people chose to write comments in the section. 33% of the male, 55% of the women responded in the comment section. These responses were so damning, and I'm going to protect anonymity. I don't want any, it's never going to get out. However, it changed the focus of my dissertation. These comments were so disturbing, I decided to change my focus. I'm going to do a qualitative study in which I look at the emotional or physical fallout to individuals that have been chronically bullied, harassed, or mobbed. I want to find out. And I'm going to find out if there's any long-term effects, like, believe it or not, certain individuals suffer PTSD and flashbacks because of their experiences. And that's what I'm going to focus in on. So let's look at some of the respondents from the male. 13 of the individuals simply stated never bullied. I find it interesting. They could have left it blank, but they decided to say never bullied. Now, is that a statement? I mean, I don't know. Is that in and of itself something to look at? Various males criticized the survey as stupid. I can't repeat some of the words that were used. However, I want those individuals to know that those of you who responded to that survey, you're the reason why I'm doing this research, because of individuals such as yourself. 7 individuals changed jobs because of the toxic environment. Multiple males complained of the quality of students coming out of school. They don't like what's coming out of school. Curriculum's changed. We have to change with it. Okay. The delineation, job delineation, ABC does a delineation. Things have changed over the years. So it's not the school you went to. We're changing our direction and what we're doing, our pathway. And so complaining about the quality of students, you might want to contact the school and find out how you can better the experience for residents. Instead of complaining about the student, find out what their foundation is so that you can better their experience. Multiple males observed others leaving. The only point I'm going to make here is that if you watch it, you should say something. You should be involved. Silence is not golden when it comes to bullying, mobbing, and harassment, because it could easily happen to you. And then there are individuals talking about counseling and their marriages on the rocks because of it. Now let's look at the female responses. Only one reported, and it wasn't just a statement. She said, never bullied. I've had an enjoyable career. And so that was great. 18 commented, and their comments could easily be construed as sexual harassment. That's 22% of the individuals that responded. Why is this important? Because if this is ever documented, and they chose to, and they could prove it, they can literally file legal suit against the company that they're working for. More of the females than males had reported that they changed due to a negative behavior. Some of them said they went into education or manufacturers to get away from it. Question: there were females that literally were asked if they were going to get pregnant during their interview. I guess I'm speechless on that one. There were others that had commented they were racially harassed. Once again, that's harassment based on the Civil Rights Act. That's very costly to a company if it's proven to be true. There were some women, based on their first name, were told to change their name if they want to be taken seriously by male superiors and physicians. And then there are also multiple females that were seeking counseling. In general, some of the respondents had said that their instructors at school they felt made them uncomfortable, and they were sexually harassed by their instructors. On a personal note, I had some former students named, which really bothers me considering I taught them and I remember how they were in school. So it pains me to see that some of my former students were named. And then I also, a big shout out to my Canadian friend who painted a happy work environment in Canada. So yes, I know you're not 10-ply on harassment. Thank you. So discussion. The study was performed during the shutdown. So there's a variable that it probably influenced my answers. The percentages, if I look at the percentages and the results of what the responses were, it shows that female millennials with an MPO or an MSPO had the most activity reported for bullying, mobbing, and harassment. And I just want that to be known that it still coincides with, I believe it's this apprentice bullying, so to speak. So it's like you got to earn your stripes kind of mentality. So Tom, I get it. Land your plane. What is the overall message in all this? Well, you have to understand the effects of bullying and stress on the body. The body hates stress. If you see any of these characteristics, if you're coming home with constant headaches, you have chest pains, you have increased blood pressure, you have poor concentration, you're struggling to find words, you have indecisiveness, or you're walking around complaining that the world is unfair to you, chances are you might want to look in the mirror and say, what's going on? Not only that, but stress. Research is coming out now. There's more and more research being done showing the effects of bullying, mobbing, and harassment on the aging process and the physiological aspect breakdowns of the telomeres. So we're seeing that there is a direct effect physically. This message goes to the company, whether you're mom and pop, whether you're a publicly traded company, whether you're a manufacturer, doesn't matter in our field. Management or the owner need to recognize the signs of bullying, mobbing, and harassment to their company, of their employees. Why? Because it equates to financial fallout. Research shows that if someone is bullied, one of the telltale signs is they get away from this activity. They call in sick. Bullied employees have an average of 2.5 more sick days than someone who's happy. They're also what's called presenteeism. That's a term a lot of you don't know, but it's funny because it's like you go to work and you're a zombie. You show up to work, but you're not engaged. You're just showing up. And so you may have frequent errors. Why? Because you're not mentally engaged. You're just there. And you pretend to be doing things at work and you're not productive. If you're not productive, it costs money. If you see that your employees are anxious, you might want to sit them down and find out. It may not be the company. It may be home life, but you don't know. People that have the inability to rebound from a simple stressful situation. If your company is suffering from frequent turnover, get to the bottom of it. Is it one person? What's going on? Is it the system? Now, if you have somebody that's creating sexual harassment, that may lead to a legal problem that you might want to address. Okay, so what do I recommend here? I want to encourage you to, if you don't have one, adopt a policy on bullying, mobbing, and harassment. You need to come up with something in paper to show that it exists. Number two, develop an awareness training. Even if you're a mom and pop, you can sit down as a group and have an in-service and talk about, listen, I want this to be an open, I want everybody to be, I want to be approachable. I want people to understand that this company, we work together as a group. We have a common vision. If there's a problem, I need to know about it, come to me. And you also need to know about steps towards reported bullying, which is why I mentioned that if you ever sit in that presentation that's held by the heads, the female leadership of the different organizations, ABC, AOPA, Academy, NCOPE, they give you wonderful resources from the EEOC to follow up with. And if possible, get rid of the cancerous person that's causing all the problems. If it is determined that this person is a bully, the Workplace Bullying Institute is very clear about this. Only 5% of the bullies ever get fired. 6% won't ever get punished. Think about that. The rest of it is all on the target. So bullies know they can get away with it. So call them out, get rid of them. If they're costing you money, then you might want to look at it, because the rest of it is all on a target. The target's either going to quit, they're going to get fired, or they transfer. Bottom line, a happy work environment equals a happy employee. A happy employee is more productive. And so in that, you end up helping out your bottom line. So what's the future direction? My future direction for my dissertation is to explore the emotional fallout. I am going to revisit the results from from this past survey. I'm going to dig deeper in the weeds a little bit. However, most likely what I want to do is I'm going to perform this survey a second time when things are a little bit more open and I can be assured that pandemics aren't in the way. So I'm going to probably redo that and then compare the two. So here's my references. A big thank you once again. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. It means a lot to me that you care about my research. And if you have any questions, please let me know.